Hey guys, it's Ashley and welcome to my September wrap-up. So I'm going to be doing things a little bit differently in this wrap-up. Normally I go through the books that I read in chronological order throughout the month, but this time I'm going to rank them worst to best because I definitely had a disappointment or two and I definitely had a major surprise or two. But before I get into my September reads, I first want to go through the books that I'm actually currently in the middle of because I am in the middle of a whopping 4 books right now, which doesn't normally happen, but I have so many videos that I'm in the middle of vlogging and planning that like it just is happening. And also I want to go through the books that I read at the very end of August because if you remember last month, I filmed my August wrap-up a couple of days in advance and I ended up finishing 2 whole books before August was even over in the last like 2 days. So let's get into those real quick so that we can get into my September reads later. Let's go. First up, the books that I'm in the middle of currently. The first one I want to talk about is The Diviners by Libba Bray. So this one I'm listening to on audiobook. This is a long book. I was not expecting it to be as long as it was, and I would probably be getting through it faster if I was physically reading it, but you guys really recommended that I read the audiobook. When I asked a while ago on my Instagram for audiobook recommendations, a lot of people said The Diviners had a great narrator, and y'all weren't wrong. This girl, oh my god, she can do so many voices. It's just astonishing to me that people can be that good at just reading an audiobook. So if you haven't listened to this on audiobook, I highly recommend because it is the cat's meow, you guys. Anyway, I've only been listening to this book while I have been crocheting because that has turned into my new hobby. I love crocheting beanies and bucket hats. That's what I've been doing, and I've been listening to this on audiobook, and it's really good. I won't go into too much detail because I'm gonna save it for when I finish it, so probably in my next wrap-up. But it had a really slow start. I was honestly like getting really bored by it in the beginning, but there was just something about like the characters and like how many there are, and you know, the fact that I knew at some point they were all gonna come to this big realization that ended up being the plot of the book and they would all come together, something would happen. That's been keeping me going, and I'm slowly getting to those points where like things are happening. It's set in like the 1920s in New York, and also so many of the characters have such a strange secret and like backstory that you don't know about yet, and I'm just like eagerly, a little bit impatiently waiting for that to finally be revealed. So definitely excited to keep going with this, and it is definitely a good book for October. It is giving me such creepy, eerie feelings, especially when like that creepy devil ghost Naughty John or whatever comes into the story, and it's just the narrator does such a good job at giving me literal chills. Oh my god. Okay, so I'm in the middle of that one. In addition to that, I actually just started Mistborn, The Final Empire by Brandon Sanderson, which finally I am getting to. I'm so excited that I started this book the other night. I'm only on chapter 2. I'm already farther than I've ever read because that's where my last book cut off. My physical copy that I have that was a little bit damaged. So I'm already farther than I've ever been, and I'm very confused by the story, but eager to see where it's gonna go. The only thing that I knew going into this book was obviously it's a high fantasy, it's Brandon Sanderson. Everybody loves this story, but in addition, the magic system has something to do with metal and like metalworking or something. I haven't really fully grasped that yet because like I said, I'm only on chapter 2. So far, I'm liking it. So crossing my fingers that that continues that way. The third book that I'm currently in the middle of, I haven't even gotten to the books that I've already read. The third book I'm in the middle of right now is The Burning Maze, which is book 3 in the Trials of Apollo series by Rick Riordan. I'm just gonna save my feelings for this book for the vlog that I'm making because I don't really want to talk about it right now. For those of you who have been with me or who have watched my videos when I've talked about this, I've only ever made it to book 2 in this series. For some reason, I just never continued on with it. I knew based on comments that I've seen on my videos about Rick Riordan's books, and I've known vaguely what was going to happen in this book, if not at the end of this book, but I was in like denial the whole time that I was reading this because I was like, you know, no, it's not gonna happen. Like, there's no way that what I'm thinking is going to happen based on what you guys have told me what happens is going to happen. And then I got to the chapter with the haiku about tragedy, and I was like, it's very much possible because it happened. So I'm just gonna leave it at that, and you all can interpret my meaning and how I felt and just wait for that video to come out in October because I got a lot of feelings and I talk about them all in there. Also, if you guys haven't started this series yet and you are Rick Riordan fans and you've just been like putting it off for whatever reason, definitely get to it. I gotta tell you, this one is honestly my favorite so far out of all of them, despite what happens in it, just because of Apollo's character growth in it and how he changes as a person and a former god. It's just really, really all around awesome. So hop on this if you haven't already. It's just, it's so good. And the fourth book that I'm currently reading, I'm actually not going to share with you guys because I'm currently working on a video that had been secret for a little bit of time. I've been trying to keep it under wraps, but honestly, I just don't really care if I tell you guys about it. So I've actually been making a video where I read books that you guys, my subscribers, have recommended to me over the past few weeks. And I've just been kind of like scouring my comment sections and searching for book recommendations that sort of like go with what I've been wanting to read. And I've been reading a couple of them. So hopefully that video will come out in October. Once I finish the book that I'm currently in the middle of and I finish up filming the vlog, I'll be able to edit it and upload it. Yeah, so just know that your book recommendations in the comments do not go ignored, and I am in the process of sorting through them and reading a few of them a little bit at a time here and there. But I hope when it comes out that you guys like it, and I will be talking about a couple of the books that I've read for that video in this video here, but I won't go into too much detail because I do have that video coming out. Let's get on to the books that I read at the end of August, not September. The end of August. First up, I'm going to talk about one of the other books that I read for that video I just mentioned, and that was Spin the Dawn by Elizabeth Lim. This book was so good. It was so much better than I thought it was going to be, and it was just an all-around great sort of unique YA fantasy in the fact that it's all about this girl who wants to be the imperial seamstress and be like the tailor for the emperor, but only guys and men can become the tailors or whatever. So she goes undercover as a boy to try to win this competition to become the imperial tailor, and then she has to go on this journey across the lands to be able to sew these 3 legendary dresses, and all around it's just a really great story with a lot of unique features. The romance in it I was not super crazy about until I got toward the end, and then I kind of started liking it a little bit more, and I'm very eager to see where the second book goes, but I'm not going to say anything more about it because I talk about a lot of it in my vlog, so I will save it for that. And then the next book that I actually read in August was a complete just like impulse read because I just really needed something uplifting and something just really light and that would make me smile. I reread Red, White, and Royal Blue by Casey McKinston because I needed light in my life at that point. For some reason, I was just like, you know what? I want to read this. I'm just gonna do it, and I did. I reread the whole thing in probably like a day and a half. That's why I finished it at the end of August, and it was just as wonderful as it was the first time I read it this year. I truly don't think there's ever been a time where I have read a book at the beginning of the year and then reread that same book in the same year. But there's a first for everything, and that first happened in September. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about the books that I read in September, and I am going to go through them from worst to best, or not worst per se, but like my least favorite to my favorite books that I read this month. Let's start with my least favorite book that I read this month, which is probably going to shock a lot of you, and it honestly shocked me when I read it because I really wanted to love this book. So the book that I'm talking about is so sadly The Lost Book of the White by Cassandra Clare and Wesley Chu. Please don't think that I hate this book. There are lots of things that I loved, but there were an equal number of things that I disliked. So all in all, it just was not my favorite book that I read this month, and I was so sad about it. Okay, let me get into a couple of the reasons why. Things that I liked about this book. I liked Magnus and Alec as parents. Any of their romance scenes, any of the scenes where they were a couple but they were not only worried about their own lives but each other's. Just Magnus and Alec in general, I absolutely love them together. I love reading about them. Like, just their stories are great to me, and the scenes that they were in together, those scenes were some of my favorites in this book, especially the scenes with Magnus and Alec and Max. They were just so good. I loved every second of that. I also loved in this book that the whole gang, meaning like basically everybody from the Mortal Instruments, was basically back in this book. I did like that, but there were also some things that I didn't like about that, surprisingly, which I'll get to in a second. And lastly, I also loved that these books were set in like 2007 and 2010. 10, because we got a lot of the backstory that we wouldn't have gotten in the Mortal Instruments had we not gotten these books, like aka like stuff with Ragnar Fell. Also, at the end of the book that I have, there was like this really cute like short story bonus wedding scene that was not between Magnus and Alec, I will say, not between them, but it was just a really cute wedding scene. It was kind of weird the way that it took place, but it was all around cute and I did enjoy that. Okay, things that I was not crazy about in this book, which like I said, I am extremely sad that I have to say any of this because I loved the first book. The first book in this series, the Red Scrolls of Magic, I think it's called, was so good. It was everything that I wanted in a series with Magnus and Alec, and this one just did not hit the mark for me. First off, the pacing, I hated. I hated the pacing of this book, and I can't even explain to you the exact reasons why I hated it. I just remember thinking that this book was like sluggish to get through. It was just, nothing was happening, and it was making me so frustrated. A really like major event would happen, and then everybody would just have to spend like a third of the book researching it and like talking about researching it and going to research it and then talking about their research, and then like another major thing would happen and then they'd have to sit and they'd think for like a fourth of the book, and they'd think and they'd talk about their thoughts and they would research some more. I understand talking through what is happening in the book to get us to understand like their thought processes. I understand like talking through things that are confusing to the characters, but there was just something about nothing happening and then them needing to research. Like, I swear they must have researched shit in this book for like half of the entire book. Half of the whole book was just them researching what was happening and scenes of them researching rather than like anything actually happening. Also, even when they got into like the underworld sort of other dimension that they were in during half of this book, it was like there would be a fight scene and then there would be like a really long point of time in the book where they would just be walking or like sleeping or pondering, and I was like, can we please have something happen? I feel really bad having to say that, and I'm sure that some of you do not feel the same way, and that's totally fine, and I don't mean to be like shitting on this book at all because I did enjoy it for the most part, but just the pacing just really had me falling asleep half the time. There are some books where you can have a big group of characters, right? And like the conversation flows, it feels like everybody's taking part, it feels good, it feels nice. But for some reason in this, it felt like there could be a conversation with all of them and only 3 of them would actually take part in the conversation, and you'd just be sitting there like, well, where are the other 6 people in this group right now? It was really odd. There was also the whole thing with Simon in this book that I understood, and I liked that they threw it in there to kind of show that Simon, all of this stuff didn't just happen to Simon, and that he's like really experiencing like almost PTSD because of all of it. But at the same time, I felt like it was so out of place in this story that it just felt really odd to me. I don't know. I like 90% of what I'm saying about this is just like, I don't know what happened. Like, I really think that Isabel said maybe like 50 words throughout the entire story. And it's like, then why was she even there? Oh my god. On top of everything else, the whole plot and the storyline with Samael or Samal or whatever his name is and the Svefnefnthorn just really threw me for a loop. The whole thing with Shinyan and like her just showing up at random points in time. The number of times that they would be doing like absolutely nothing and then suddenly like Shinyan would just appear as if like we needed something to happen that, you know, the characters could react to. It was annoying the number of times that she just magically showed up, stabbed Magnus, said it was a gift, and then left and then disappeared, and they just couldn't do anything. It made me so annoyed. Also, the number of times that every character in this book said the word thorning should be a crime. I never want to hear the word thorning again. I hated it. I hated the fact that we couldn't just say stabbed, that we couldn't just say like literally just like stabbed with the thorn. We had to give it a verb. We had to say thorning. You can't go through another thorning again, Magnus. It just sounds stupid. I'm so sorry. I'm like ranting about this now, but I just really wanted to love this book because I absolutely adore Magnus and Alec, and I adored the first book in this like series, and I adore their storyline throughout all of the Mortal Instruments and all of Cassandra Clare's books, and there was just something about this book that really frustrated me. I will forever support Magnus and Alec in any of the stories that they're in, and honestly I will probably read the next book in this series because I just want to root for them and I want them to have a good story, but this particular book just did not do it for me, and I'm really, really sorry. So now that I've got that one out of the way, let's talk about the next book that was just a tiny bit underwhelming to my expectations, and that is Crescent City by Sarah J. Maas. I did enjoy parts of it. I enjoyed Bryce. I liked her character. I liked how much of a like beginning of this book that we got with her and Danica, and just really like understanding their friendship and really like, you know, sort of growing with them for a short period of time until like that one point in the book happens where the rest of the book is sort of like defined by that. Bryce is definitely not a character that I feel like I can relate to in any way whatsoever, but I still really enjoyed her for the most part. Now, Hunt is a different story. So, I know, having read Sarah J. Maas's books before, that she can really only write one male love interest type of character. And I'm not saying that that's a bad thing. Like, she knows how to write this type of person, and she does it well to the point where her audience really enjoys it. And like, I am not an exception to that. I loved Throne of Glass. I love A Court of Thorns and Roses. I like Rowan. I like Rhysand. Like, I'm gonna just say it here. I like those characters. But there was something about having to read that same exact character for a third time in this new book where I feel like the character could have been like something totally different, and the book would have felt so different from her other ones that I would have enjoyed it more. But it wasn't like that. So let's go through a little like journey real quick, because I wrote all this down again in the heat of the moment after I finished this book. So in Throne of Glass we have Rowan, right? He's gone through centuries and millennia of bloodshed and war. He's a bit of a tortured soul. He had the love of his life ripped away from him. You learn all of this when you first meet him. He's broody and he's annoying and air of fire, but then he meets Selena and they really get to know each other, and things just sort of evolve from there. Then we have A Court of Thorns and Roses, and we have Rhysand, who also has a millennia of war and bloodshed and a tortured soul deep within him. And while he didn't have the love of his life ripped away from him like Rowan did, he was a sex slave to Amarantha for 50 years and has lots of just bad things, memories, things like that because of it. But then he meets Feyre and things totally change. So now we have Hunt. And Hunt is a bit of a tortured soul because he's got, you know, bloodshed and war under his belt, right? And he's also had the love of his life ripped away from him, and he's also been a slave. So he's literally a combination of Rowan and Rhysand, but his name doesn't start with R. It was just reading the same character over again that really got me thinking, like, wow, I knew that she only wrote one type of character before, but this just takes it to a new level. She just combines the two male main characters in her other books to make this character, which, even though I'm saying all of this, right, I didn't actually mind it. I just thought it was really funny. And I just wanted to point that out if you hadn't already noticed it. Things that really sort of underwhelmed my expectations, the book was super slow. It was so slow and just like really slow moving, which usually I'm fine with and I can get through a slow book, but really the story didn't pick up until like page 450. And it was at that point on that things started getting like really, really good. There was a point toward the end where like things sort of took like a bit of a plot twist, and then I was kind of like not on board with it at all. Like, I was just like, this doesn't make any sense to the motivations, to the characters, to anything. Like, I don't understand any of what's happening, but I'll see what ends up happening. Also, this world was just like, what is happening right now? I was so confused by it. So we go into it and I'm thinking, oh, it's a fantasy, but then people have cell phones, people have like very modern stuff. And so I'm like, okay, so we're talking about like a world with like werewolves and vampires and fairies and things like that and angels, but we're also having like modern technology. And I was like, okay, this is an interesting sort of like, you know, twist to the normal fantasy world. Like, okay, let's see what happens. But then as soon as you grasp that understanding, it's like she knows that you get what's happening, and then all of a sudden it's like, this is the hierarchy of power, and this is how political structures work, and this is where everybody lives, and this is what's happening, and this is the structure of the entire Crescent City, and this is, and this is, and this is, and this is, and it was just like, info dump on info dump just piled on top of you at the very beginning of the story, to the point where like I was like 3/4 of the way through this book and the Asteri had been mentioned like a million times, and still at that point I had absolutely no idea who the Asteri were. Even though I know that we had been explained about it in the beginning of the book, I just could not retain that knowledge for the life of me. There was something about the world and something about a little bit of the pacing that I really struggled with. I really did like the romance, to be honest with you. I was expecting a little bit more because Sarah J Maas has a bit of a reputation, but I was really happy that it wasn't as much as I thought it was. But yeah, that's what I have to say about it. I didn't talk about what this book was about, which I just realized going through this, so I'm sorry I ranted for so long without actually going through what this is about. Essentially we follow this girl named Bryce Quinlan who is half fae, half human, and she works in this antiquities shop, and her best friend is like a werewolf who's like the most powerful whatever, and then one day her friend and the pack are like murdered, and she has to work with Hunt, who is this like big badass angel type guy with a big reputation of killing people, who's also a slave, as I mentioned, and she has to work with him to try to figure out who murdered the pack. It was just, there was a lot of different things happening in this story. I don't think there's anything else I can say about it. I did enjoy it. Like with all of these books, there were parts that I enjoyed and there were parts that I was just like about. And so that was Crescent City from this perspective, everybody. I hope you enjoy. So next I want to talk about the 2 books that I have reread this month, and that is the first and second book in the Trials of Apollo series by Rick Riordan. As I mentioned in my last TBR for this month, I was planning on reading all 4 of these this month in preparation for the last one. I'm running a little bit behind schedule as it's already Tuesday of the 4th week, so I should be on book 4, but I'm still only on book 3, so hopefully I'll catch up. But I'm putting these ones in this part of the video now because the first 2 books in this series were not like the best books that I've ever read from him personally, but they still were really good, so that's why they're going here. I'm not going to spend too much time talking about them. I've already talked about what these books are about in lots of other videos, so you can check any one of those out, and I'm sure I will give you a synopsis of this story. But yeah, read these 2 and I'm in the middle of the 3rd. So next we're going to talk about the books that were my favorites this month, and there were 3 of them that I would give like 5 stars to if I were still rating books. They were phenomenal, they were so good, and I can't wait to talk about them right now. The first book that I want to mention is Cemetery Boys by Aiden Thomas, which was my Patreon book club pick of September. If you don't know, I have a Patreon where every month we pick a book and we read it together. I put up a separate reading vlog all about this book, and I did all of that in September, so if you want to learn more you can check out the link in my description for the Patreon and check it out and see if you would be interested. But that's where all of that is, and that is where and why I read this book this month. If I had to give you like a single recommendation for a book to read this fall that would give you all of those fall feelings and vibes and things that you're searching for, definitely would recommend this book. The story is about a boy named Yadriel who wants to be a brujo. His family are brujos. They are like sort of witches in a way that can not commune with the dead, but like see ghosts and can set them free and stuff like that. They're kind of like the guardians over ghosts, let's say, sort of like that. So the whole story is about Yadriel. He is a trans boy, and you know, his family is not super accepting of him because, you know, brujos are typically like men and they don't see him as like a full man, and so it's like this big struggle in the beginning of the story. And so to prove himself, he goes through with the ceremony on his own and tries to summon a ghost and set him free. So he ends up summoning a ghost who he thinks is his cousin, and ends up summoning the wrong person. So he summons Julian, who was this outcast kid in high school. Julian will not leave until he figures out how he died and what happened to him and whether his friends are okay. So essentially Yadriel has to work with Julian to try to figure all this stuff out, and it ends up being much bigger than either of them ever thought. Like I said, the story was absolutely adorable at times. It was also heartwarming and touching. It just put a smile on your face, and it just really, like, I don't know, it just got all of your feelings just like coming to the surface, and you just wanted to, like, you know, scream and shout, but then also smile and laugh and cry, and it was so good. I loved Yadriel and Julian, but I also loved Maritza. She was so great. She is Yadriel's best friend, and I just, I just can't. I love all three of them. I love the story, I love the feelings and the fall vibes, and everything about this story was so good. So definitely read this. It is worth the hype. I loved it so much. So the second book that was one of my absolute favorites that I read this month was another one that I read for that books my subscribers have recommended to me video, and that is Beartown by Fredrik Backman. I'm not going to say too much on this story as well because I do have that vlog coming out that showcases all of my wider range of feelings when it came to this book, but this book was phenomenal. I can't even talk about what this book felt like. It like ripped my heart out of my chest, basically, is like what this book did to me. One of the best ways that I have found to kind of broadly summarize what this book is about is the Kirkus Reviews little snippet on the back of it. It says, like Friday Night Lights, this is more than about youth sports. This is part coming-of-age novel, part study of moral failure, and finally a chronicle of groupthink in which an unlikely hero steps forward to save more than one person from self-destruction. A thoroughly empathetic examination of the fragile human spirit, Backman's latest will resonate a long time. That is like the best way that I can describe this book because all of that is so, so true. So essentially this story follows this small town named Beartown, and it's in the middle of Sweden, I think is where it's set, because I'm pretty sure this book is translated from Swedish. But so it's about the small town named Beartown, which is hanging on by a thread, and the only thing that is keeping this town standing is the ice hockey team. If they're able to win the championship, then money will start flowing into the town again, and people will start, you know, being happy and living here in happiness and things like that. Like, so basically the town's entire like future rests on the shoulders of these teenage boys, which you can already tell is not going to bode well for the story. So essentially a few days before the championship, something absolutely awful and devastating happens, and the whole town ends up being broken up into sides over it. When I say I cried when I read this book, I mean I was full on tears, sobbing, emotions, like everything was just drawn out of me. It was, like I said, simultaneously the best and worst feeling at the same time, and it was the weirdest experience, but I literally would not go back and change it. It was so good. Won't go into specifics on this, but there are some content warnings that I want to give if you might be interested in picking this one up. Specifically sexual assault and rape, also suicidal thoughts and actions. Yeah, there are a couple of content warnings just in case any of those things are particular triggers for you, but like honestly, and I'm not exaggerating when I say this, I'm pretty sure Fredrik Backman is going to become one of my favorite authors as I continue to read his stories, because I've heard so much about him and I'm so glad that I finally got to him. So thank you to whoever recommended I read his work. Thank you. I already have like 3 of his books on my list. I bought one of his other books that a lot of people have already told me is amazing, so definitely looking forward to getting to more of his work soon. So the final book that I have in this very long video that I have filmed today is one that you guys probably all know that I've read at this point because I have a book talk up for it on my channel this month, and that is Thunderhead by Neil Schusterman, which is book 2 in the Arc of a Scythe series. I'm pretty sure you all know my thoughts about Scythe. I'm pretty sure that most people who have read this loved this book and the series, and I've talked about it so many times that I don't want to bore you again to tears, so I will just put here that I absolutely adored this book. It was phenomenal. One of my favorites of the month, one of my favorites of the year. I have a book talk up for it and a book talk up for Scythe, which is the first book if you're interested in learning more, and that's all I'm gonna say because I've talked about this so much, and again, I don't want to bore you to tears. And so those are all of the books that I read in September at the end of August, and I'm currently in the middle of reading. While I had some amazing surprises and absolute favorites that I read this year that are definitely going to top my list for favorites of the year, I also had a couple of disappointments that I was just super sad about, and I'm really sorry that I went on such a rant with a couple of them, and I'm particularly sorry if they are your favorite books of all time and I just ranted about them. I think it's safe to say this was a pretty good reading month for me. I definitely didn't get as many books in as I have in the past, but definitely read some amazing ones this month that I will not forget for a very long time, and I'm just really glad that I read them. So if you have a favorite book that you read in September, definitely let me know down below because I would love to talk to you about them and learn about some more books. But anyway, I think that's going to be it for this video, you guys. If you want to follow me on any of my socials, everything is in the description down below. Thank you so much for watching this long video, and I will catch you later. Bye!